This is July 7th, 1992.
That I suppose there's certainly many buildings. I don't want to offend anybody in terms of their age and the group, but there are certainly buildings in Columbus that you talk about on the tour that most of you didn't have a chance to see being constructed. So it's kind of neat to imagine that the tour guides are actually listening to it before you can see it. We hope it will all be there someday soon enough. I guess we're going to try to we're going to go all the way around the park as best we can with the weather, and I'm going to try to talk to you about some of the areas that haven't been realized yet, give you some of our founding principles, talk a little bit about Stanley Seidowitz's buildings, though you should definitely get a chance to hear about them from him as well, because I think they're just wonderful additions to the park. And for those of you that haven't been in to see some of the structures further in that are far along, I think you'll be very happily impressed.
I'm going to give you that.
There are a lot of things. I mean, this is such an unusual project. You're Columbus residents, and you know it. This is such an unusual project to start with, given the time that we live in. This is not the kind of project that many cities are endeavoring to undertake right now, time of real fiscal leniency. It's really remarkable that a small city like Columbus has garnered such an interesting collection. One of the very first major accomplishments for us, I was at a park board meeting, and Jim Lloyd, one of the parks commissioners, said to me, you know, Michael, what makes Central Park so great? You know, we don't want you to make something like Central Park, but we want to have a park that's as important to Columbus as Central Park is to New York City. And the thing that came to mind immediately was that when they laid out Central Park, they laid it out in such a defensible way, such a way that it's not easy to encroach on Central Park, you know, the way it's sort of bounded by the block cut right out of the grid of the city. So one of the first things that I did, was to get the Parks Commissioners, the Park Board, to increase Millrace Park from 66 acres to 85 acres, and to add that entire parcel of land above the North Lake, which at the time was slated to become an apartment complex. And the Cummins Corporation gave the land to the Parks Department, and then they paid for the cleanup of a lot of toxic conditions which existed on that site in order for the site to be safe for public access. And so it's an ongoing partnership of people, you know, making contributions of different kinds to the park. I guess one of the important things to talk about that you don't see here yet is that one of the other things that we did in terms of the park design was to substantially reorganize how it functions as a place. You probably all remember that you used to come into the park, drive over the covered bridge, loop back around, and come out. And by the addition of that 20 or so acres to the north, we've been able to make the loop road one that will allow people to come in at one point and exit at another. And it actually makes the park tied into the city much better than it was before, we think. The other thing we've done is that we've created this large parking area here. Now, one of the things that you don't see is that there will be long rows of trees, one of them at the base of the railroad tracks, one of them that runs through the median of the parking lot, two of them over here, which we call the tree rows. And what those are kind of long rows of trees that give some separation between Lindsay Street and the park. Now, instead of being a monoculture of one species of tree, because Columbus has learned about monocultures along with the rest of the country, these rows of trees are actually mixed species of trees. They're native trees. They're real survivors. They're trees that a lot of people, frankly, turn their nose up at, because from here to the other end, there's an incredibly bad circumstances for trees to grow in that we can't change. There's brick rubble, there's ash, there's sand, there's garbage, there's industrial waste. And so we look to the park at this end for clues about the selection of trees in that regard. People will shudder when I say some of these because I know how Columbus feels about things like Kentucky coffee tree and hackberry and honey locust. But in fact, these are the trees that will grow, that will thrive, that aren't trees that everybody's going to love the way you might a dogwood or a crabapple in your front yard. But they're not meant to provide that kind of role here. They're meant to get big and be really strong and let this parking lot be full of cars and the lawn be full of cars and the thing beyond, and these great big trees will reach over and basically separate you from seeing all of that when you come in the entry road here. Well, I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois in Urbana, and I have quite a lot of familiarity with the landscape of the Middle West and of Indiana. And one of the things that the earth mound is intended to provide, which also becomes the amphitheater, is that that's intended to be or it's imagined in my mind symbolically as an homage to the tradition of mound building among the American Indians that lived here prior to Columbus's discovery of America. The park is being dedicated on Columbus Day, more or less, 1992. And it also happened that we're making this great big round lake in the middle of the park. And we had a lot of soil that, we needed to use. And so we thought of a creative way of actually building up and making an amphitheater, because we don't have any hills in Millrace Park. I think you're all quite aware of that. So we made our own hill to have an amphitheater on. And we've positioned it in a way so it's visible from the street. When you're dealing with the out of doors, and particularly performances which happen in the summer, you have to deal with solar orientation. So this amphitheater is positioned in a way so the audience is primarily looking to the north-northwest, so that the setting sun in the evening will not be in the eyes of either the performers or the audience. So that's a kind of site-specific thing about the amphitheater. Now the tower used to be, in the early design, down where the flat rock and the driftwood come together. Because I particularly have always liked that part in the park, and people don't understand how rivers are a part of the landscape. I thought it would be a great area to get people up in the air to look at those rivers coming together. But as we thought about the commitment that making the tower would be, and none of us in the beginning imagined that it would ever really be possible to have the tower. We thought, oh, well, we'll show them the tower. Maybe they'll build the tower someday. The idea then came, and it was partly when Stanley Seidowitz, as you all know, Paul Kennan, who was the park architect, died during the schematic design phase. We had a new architect search. Stanley was hired, and the tower got moved up, and it becomes a major connector now to downtown. Now, Stanley will sometime tell you about the design, but the proportioning of the tower and its aesthetic, in his mind, is a very direct dialogue with the bell tower of Eliel Saarinen's church. And when you see its proportion and its shape, you're going to understand that it very consciously is an homage to Saarinen Tower. It will be a clock tower. It's going to be 80 feet tall. Now, Mark, how tall is it now?
About 40.
It's about half as tall as it's going to be. So if you do this, to use your fingers as a caliper and see how tall it is, and just slide that baby up, you can see it's going to be a very dramatic structure. It's very slight, however. It's very thin, and it's intended as a kind of major hello, I'm waving to you sort of thing from the park to downtown Columbus. When the railroad tracks were moved, which happened when Lindsay Street was moved, they were built up on a kind of very slight rise, partly as a levee, I understand. But one of the downsides of that is that when you're on Washington Street and you look towards the park because the road goes up, you actually don't see into the park, you just see trees in the distance. So we finally realized that the tower would be a kind of an invitation to the park. Maybe the next thing we should do is walk down here to where those cars are parked, and we'll then look at the amphitheater from there.
The tower is an invitation to the park.
First of all, I love the history of the 20th century, and there are a lot of things on the site that are very exciting. A lot of things that were given by the client. From the beginning, I mean, and then the second question, of course, is who's going to remove it anyway. But from the very beginning, I love the foundation of the old tannery, and I like the fact that it's called Millrace Park. You look at the 19th century engravings, you see that little mill race. It actually was way up in there. You can see it on the 19th century map of the city, but they ran water in from the flat rock to power things on the site. I thought, what a natural. We'll take the parking, we'll put it behind the tannery wall, and then when you walk through the wall, you'll have this sense of, you know, you've left your car, you've left the parking lot, and you've gone into the park. So all the way down the wall, we've made these cuts, and then there will be sidewalks that run through these and out into the park and will stop in a quite unexplained way. They're like these sort of tongues that reach out and stop. We're not trying to connect all the places in the park with all the places in the park. So they're kind of thresholds. So the sort of places we will put the paths where the grass would wear out, but we figure when people get out in the lawn, they're going to go off in a variety of directions. So they're going to stop there. One of the things that I want to emphasize, I started to talk about it earlier and I got distracted, but a lot of the site work, including a lot of the concrete work, is being done by the Job Corps. The Job Corps is a federally sponsored program, and it's through this federal program really that partly the dollar value of their contribution is in fact a very large percentage of the cost of the project, and it's got some trade-offs in the sense that, you know, they've got wonderful instructors, but these are kids. Many of them have never done any of this work before, and they're learning trades. They're going out in the world to be, you know, important citizens, and they've got something to offer. And now this is a classic example of both the design partnership and the building partnership. The amphitheater ultimately is a collaboration between Seidowitz and myself. The berm was in the design before Stanley was on board, but when Stanley got involved in the design, the shape of the thing started to change, and the concrete walls that you see, that is the platform of the stage. There will be a ramp that sort of swings up on the back side of that, but before those slanted pieces that are built into the hillside. The sidewalk, which is handicapped accessible without ramps, will go right up there, and that's how audience will get to the amphitheater structure, which is not yet built. That's going to be built into the hillside among those slow pieces. Now, the stage structure is being built by a Columbus contractor. Who's building it, Mark? Taylor Brothers? Taylor Brothers are building that, but the Job Corps is building the site part of it on the other side of the path. The amphitheater will be run under the auspices of the Columbus Park and Recreation Board, but it will be available to all the arts groups in the entire community of Columbus through arrangements, through reservations with the Parks Department. Now, another thing about a small city, it's not even a small city, it's just sensible design. The stage looks predominantly towards the amphitheater, which is built on the hillside. And the amphitheater seats around 475 people, more or less. Don't put that in the official tour until it's confirmed. But the other thing the stage does is that it works in reverse, so that country in the park, events like that, performers can be up on the platform and the audience can basically be sitting in this very large area here, and so that 4,000 or 5,000 people can be at a performance and look in the other direction. It doesn't work quite so well for solar exposure, but those are only like 4 or 5 events maximally a year. That's what is anticipated. Mark, do you want to add anything before we move on?
How many Job Corps people are involved in the project?
There's a question Mark wants to answer.
On a good day with full crews down here, we have mostly Atterbury students, but also 3 crews from other Job Corps centers, and we have upwards of 100 people, 80 to 100 students.
You use your own equipment or
Yes.
Job Corps students use their own equipment.
Well, the surface of the positioning of the amphitheater, first of all, is on an area that only floods every 10 to 20 years. Now, we all know a significant number of the trainees are women, which is great, and as it should be. But the siting of the amphitheater is partly that it's not down in the area which floods annually. It's up on this whole area. Now, you all remember a year ago, January, I think the water got up into the parking lot, or right about up to here. The amphitheater has been graded. The slope of the amphitheater, as it is now, is not in its final form. It's not going to be as steep, but it will all be grassed and mowed, and it should be fairly stable relative to the flood water. A lot of the things that we've done in the park are real simple in terms of materials. It's partly because even though it's a lot of money for Columbus, it's not a big budget to do a park over. We're using really simple things like concrete blocks, concrete blacktop. It's partly for budget, but those are also materials that can get slimy and gunky, and it's going to clean up easily. It's going to be possible to get hoses out and come down here and clean that stuff up. Mark, what do you think is the best way to go? Should we have to go over to the restroom at the end of the linden trees, maybe? Or
Yeah, we could. Do you want to talk about the playground at all?
okay,
We could walk around that direction.
okay. The parking lots also run through this area, and this is just an anticipation of the lighting. There's a many of the places, I don't know if everyone has it, I can't remember now, but many of the places where you come through the walls, we put lighting there. I just want to explain one thing, and then we'll go get away from this noise. There are a few picnic shelters that Seidowitz designed that are dispersed throughout the park. And that's one of them down there, and the structures are extremely whimsical. I think that they add a very, excuse my presumption if I say this, but the Cummins Engine Foundation architecture program has sponsored until very recent. In the last 20 years, it's been a more established, older group of architects that have been doing buildings through the project. Recently, with the buildings that Lears and Weinzapfel, the school project, with the park buildings that Seidowitz has done, I think some very spunky young architecture is being produced. I know some of it is controversial, which means a lot of people hate it. But that's the way a lot of architecture is for a good long time. And I even wonder, many of us think, I certainly think that Eliel Saarinen's church is the masterpiece. I can imagine in 1942, that was a church that a lot of people thought was the biggest joke in Indiana, and it's really a fantastic building. Anyway, this is one of my little jokes, not the structure, but this structure is at the end of 2 long rows of trees, so that when anybody in the town can reserve going to use the picnic structure for their picnic, and for a moment they're sort of king for a day. You'll go use the picnic structure and you will look down these tremendously long rows of trees that people will be sort of playing through, and it will be a great and really fanciful place to have a family gathering, or, you know, a corporate breakfast or something like that. So there are a couple of these dispersed throughout the park. Some of them are bigger than others. Seidowitz's structures are all exposed. All of the welds, all the steel is exposed, and he's used a lot of perforated metal. We'll see that in one of the structures further along. But the roof of this thing will be a kind of metal shade structure, and there's little places to grill in some of them and so forth. Maybe we will sort of little flags. That's where there's going to be a major new playground in the park, up on that slight platform up there.
What about the playground equipment? Will that be out of the books, or is that going to be designed by?
No, it will be out of the books, because it's much more affordable to do it that way. And kids really love traditional equipment.
Wood or metal?
It will be wood and metal.
Big?
It's pretty big, yeah. Let's get down. Some of you, I guess, don't know Pam Weinitz, and Pam is the chair of a new committee which is called Plant a Tree Committee for Millrace Park, and I thought maybe, you know, Pam, would you just like to explain what you're up to? And
yes, as chairperson of the Plant a Tree Committee for Columbus, which operates through...
Many of you follow architecture a lot in times when things haven't been recorded so well, before the 19th and 20th century. But there are a lot of alleged things allegedly by buildings. Well, this is an allegedly by Dan Kiley landscape. Seriously, I'm told that these rows of lindens were something that Kiley had some connection to at some point in time in the 50s. And I know there are some things that Kiley has done in town that haven't worked out great, but he's truly the great living American landscape architect. And so it was wonderful to me to find out that about this. To kind of, these are called the linden rows, and these are parallel to my tree rows. And so the 6 of them are all parallel together, and they kind of march out towards the street. From this point forward, the park becomes much more informal. Here, they're very
Linden
grassy.
trees on
And the
south
other part
end of
the
park,
more
other side.
serendipitous, they're more site-specific. The lake is round. This has always been a real magical space for me. And so opening up the park at that end, putting the playground at that end and the amphitheater at the other makes this a hub of activity, a real place to be in the park. Along the front of the edge of that little promontory of soil, there's a whole row of picnic tables for parents so that people who have got one eye on their children and like to have one eye on a moment's peace can sort of be in that place and look in each direction at the same time. Found us Mark, I see some branches we need to remove. Some branches that we need to remove. This path actually aligns with the park tower. And so there's a certain amount of selective editing and thinning of branches that we're doing. This path goes all the way from the tower, all the way to the new entrance up at 8th Street. That's where the new loop road of the park comes out. You know, there's these concrete piers up there that are remnants from when they formed the COB columns. We're keeping those like the wall as a kind of industrial relic. And this straight sidewalk will connect the two. There are a couple of very long kind of circulation sidewalks in the park that are intended to complement the geometry of the front half of the park, and then the other part, as I said a minute ago, is much softer. Now we'll go through here and we'll take a peek at one of Stanley's toilets. Stanley has to tell you about his own structure sometime, but I know you all want a little aperitif. There are a few things about the bathrooms. I'll take all the wind out of his story, in other words, by telling you the best parts, but the roof structures tell you which, the shape of the structures tell you which is the men's and which is the women's entrance. Because the structure on this end makes an M. See, this is the M and the other side is the W. So if you're a man, that means that you find your way in from this side. Now what happens when you get in the swirl and the vortex, I think everybody just hopes they end up in the men's room or the women's room. Another thing, the toilets, park toilets are always nasty. They were really horrendous here. So Stanley has left these open. There is roofing on the wavy parts, but they're open at the end so that there will be lots of air circulation. They're also open at the bottom so that when the floods come, the floods will run right through and clean them out. And these are glass block walls, so that they're much less sort of hermetic, shall we say, than toilets sometimes have been in Millrace Park, there was a lot of vandalism and trouble in toilets in the park before, so it's trying to lighten them up. Anyway, the park structures have been imagined really as kind of follies, and they're each one of them is a kind of jewel or special thing in the park. We disperse them pretty much so that they don't take over the sense of being in a wild park, we hope. I guess that the strongest, the most legible part of the design that my office had a hand in, and I certainly want to emphasize that the design, that the way that I work in my office is a collaborative process, that there are, I worked in offices and helped other people with their great work long enough that I always promised that when I had my own office, I would always acknowledge all the staff that I have that helped, and a lot of people have worked on this. But the idea of the Round Lake really is completely my idea, and I'll tell you the story about it. And I probably will offend some of you mildly with this story, but the truth is the truth. I came here for the interview, and I came down to Millrace Park, and I said, what in God's name is that covered bridge doing in the middle of this park? And I didn't tell them that I had this thought when I was in the interview, because I knew it might not be a smart thing to do. So as soon as I got the commission, I started hinting around to Chuck Wilt and others that maybe we move the covered bridge. And their response was, well, maybe we won't move the covered bridge. So the question for me was, how can we make the bridge work better in the park? And one of the things that I thought was really important was that because bridges crossed rivers historically, and also because they were an artifact of the 19th century open and more agricultural landscape, though not always, but they were much more associated with open vistas before. I really wanted to open it up. I said, okay, if the covered bridge is really the symbol of when the citizens of Columbus took a hold of this park and said, by God, we're turning this into a park, something the river rats spearheaded, almost 30 years ago now. I said, we got to make it work better. That means it has to be associated with a bigger body of water, but how? I mean, you got a site that twice a year is 80% underwater. Its entire most beautiful edge is its river edge. It's already got a nice lake to the north, which has now been added to the park, the North Lake. What do we need? Another, wiggly, kidney-shaped lake? Somehow it had to become a special thing. And that ended up being a circle, and it really had to do with the fact that I wanted to find some kind of geometry that was a perfect geometry, but one that worked with the curvilinear rivers. And I was lucky enough the year before I got hired to do this to spend time at the American Academy in Rome as a fellow, and I spent some time when I was there rowing one day on a volcanic lake. And volcanoes make these incredibly beautiful, perfect round lakes. And it preoccupied me when I returned. I mean, usually people come back from Italy and, they do classical architecture, or they do Italian gardens. I came back and basically made the mouth of a volcano in Columbus, Indiana. But I had the idea that it would be a kind of heart, a middle for the park without being, I hope, aggressive. I hope it feels like an embracing place. And what will be here, you see as you go around the lake, all of these little verticals. On every one of those there will be a light fixture. And it's our one energy splurge in the park. We're using early 20th century globe light fixtures with long life, somewhat energy efficient, incandescent light bulbs. So there's really that kind of wonderful warmth and glow that you get from a real light bulb outside that, the rest of the park has extremely efficient energy. But here we're really wanting to have an inviting place to come at night. All through the year we imagine skating here. On the other side of the covered bridge, there's another structure by Seidowitz. It's a boathouse where you can take a little rowboat or a paddle boat and come out onto the round lake, or go onto the North Lake. And one of the things that's really important to understand and to know the reason why, the two lakes are not connected. You cannot go from the round lake to the North Lake. And the reason is that this is a clay-lined lake. You see those two outfalls over there? We have pumps. We're pumping water from the East Fork into the round lake all summer, so that, like a lot of ponds and lakes in Columbus, it's not without water in the middle of the summer. The North Lake is an existing lake in a gravel pit, and we can't control the water fluctuation. And so there's a dam between the two. And so it's not possible, and it was a source of great sadness for us. It's not possible that you can row from the natural lake into the man-made, into the more natural lake. It's a man-made lake. It's just carved out in an irregular shape. So I thought you'd be interested to know that. The path, there will be around the lake, they're filling it in now. There's a sidewalk, what is it, Mark? 8 feet wide? 10 foot wide sidewalk, a lot of benches, and then all the way around 80 okami cherry trees, a very early flowering, very hardy cherry tree, which will actually bloom before the Bradford pears in Columbus. And they're a vivid pink. And so when the cherry trees bloom at the round lake, we're hoping that that will be an invitation to everybody in the town to come back to the park. Winter's over, come and see the cherry trees, walk around the round lake. And they also have really good fall color.
How big do those get?
They get to be the scale of like the cherries at the tidal basin in Washington, you know, 25, 30 feet tall.
Would you spell Okami?
O-K-A-M-E.
How about hardiness and temperatures?
They're really rugged trees. They were introduced by the Morris Arboretum up in Chicago into the American landscape about 70 years ago, and it's an old-fashioned plant that fell out of favor. We got very preoccupied in horticulture and landscape architecture in the 20th century with dogwoods, crabapples, hawthorns, and this is a plant that actually we're using because of Chris Medeck Thomas, the city of Columbus's horticulturalist. I had the idea of cherries. Then we backed away and said, we need something bigger, so we were going to use bald cypresses, which would have been much bigger trees over time. Those are the trees around Fire Station number 1. But then a lot of people in Columbus remembered our original drawing and said, you know, we really would like to get back to the flowering tree, to really, the park is mostly deciduous trees. We really want something to come alive. There are a couple of places in the park where the planted forms, as I call them, where we've really organized vegetation to do something very powerful and strong. Another one, which Pam is trying to find somebody to buy, is a room defined by golden rain trees, the Coleruteria paniculata, which has a very long history of being used in Indiana. I'm sure most of you have been to New Harmony. New Harmony has as its city street tree in much of the city golden rain trees that are almost 100 years old. I actually had originally, I like junk trees. I like to use trees that will live, that will be massive. I wanted to define this room with catalpa, and the Parks Department said, over our dead body, is that going to be catalpa trees? You know those things kids use as cigars? Catalpa? No. So the head of the park board, Paige Gifford, said, I don't know, we're talking about New Harmony, and we had golden rain trees, I think, dancing around loose in the park. And he said, well, why don't we make more of that? You know, that book, Rain Tree County, was actually written for Johnson County, which is, I don't know if is it next to Bartholomew County?
Yes.
Henry County? I was Newcastle. Henry Castle?
Oh,
Henry County, okay. But that was Paige's idea, to take that room and make it golden rain, which I love so much, because for those of you that know the plant, like, you know McDonald's on Route 46? There's a beautiful one right on the corner there. What's that little street called?
Rick's Drive.
Yeah, there's a beautiful one right there just coming into bloom. So it's this time of year, nothing's in bloom, and people are looking for reasons to be out of door. And it's a whole rectangle that will be defined with about 40 golden rain trees, assuming Pam succeeds finding the support for it. What else? This is stupid stuff you won't want to put in the tour. The other presumptuous idea that I had about the covered bridge was, in New England, it's also true here, covered bridges used to have windows a lot of the time. And I thought, God, you know, now we made this great round lake. Wouldn't it be terrific if you could go into the covered bridge, and we'll just put some windows in the covered bridge. Not really, Michael. This is a real covered bridge. It never had them, so they didn't want me to add them. It was fair. I still imagine that I will come with the chainsaw the night before everything and just do one or two. But you know what's interesting to me about the covered bridge is that it's an incredibly, actually when you go in it, it's just like these structures. It's a very exposed aesthetic. All the beams are there, and it's just a structure sheathed in wood. This is a steel structure that's sheathed in metal fabric and glass block. It's absolutely the same thing. What do you think, Mark? Where should we go next? Good idea.
Probably ought to walk maybe behind the building here.
Okay.
Either side and around to the road.
How about those old steel bridges down here?
We're going to we'll show you one that we've already used, and we'll just keep going around here. I'm concerned about design is sometimes things are done for a single reason, but usually there's a kind of moving force, and then you sort of evaluate it and you sort of thinking of all the pluses and minuses that go with it. One of the things that we liked about the Earth Amphitheater, and we really never thought we'd get the tower. It's like, oh, what the hell, throw the tower in. We really imagined that the highest place in this part of the park was going to be the berm, and it was going to be a place, when you get up on that thing, you can look over to the round lake. Now, over the course of the next year, the Parks Department is going to be lifting up some of the lower branches on the trees so you can see through the park a little more to make it a little more spacious. So I always saw that as a kind of prospect, as they called them in 19th century parks. I also saw it as a sledding hill, even though it only snows a couple of times. But if the couple of times that it does snow, it's a perfect place to take flying saucers into the park and use them. We know it doesn't snow in New England anymore either. But that was the idea, that was a thing where you could slide down a little bit. Started here. The program of the park and the evaluation of the park happened was extremely public. I mean, we had a whole series of meetings right here with a hot dog cookout that the River Rats sponsored. In the summer of '90, there were a whole bunch of public presentations. And one of the things that happened because of that was that Hutch Shoemaker came to a meeting and he looked at all these little picnic shelters and he said, well, you know, that's nice, but you know, I have this thing every year where I like to take my entire company and have a breakfast in the park. We should have a structure where there could be a gathering of 30 and then people could have family reunions there and stuff like that. So there's a much bigger picnic structure further down. A lot of what we've done in the park, when it's done, I think people are gonna kind of not know that we did it. The roads have all been relocated and they've been specifically positioned to open up vistas to the river. I was really shocked the first time I came here in '89 how much, if you were in your car, you couldn't see the river. So we've moved the road over. We've removed trees in areas to open up vistas. There's new lighting. The other thing is that you can see a little of it here. There's a new people trail that goes all the way from where the people trail used to end down by the Osage orange grove. There's another piece of it there. It meanders all the way through the trees and will eventually connect up with the senior center. Now, right at the moment, we don't have the funds for a ramp at the end of the stair to go up to the senior center, but I'm sure that that's something that the Parks Department will do in time, so it will actually be a destination and a way of inviting the people who use the senior center into the park. This is the boating access ramp, and this will be retained. That's actually a state requirement that this is an official boat launching area, and it's not something we would have wanted to get rid of anyway. Activity in the park is the key to making this place work after we finish and the park goes back to being open. This is the other side of Wood structure. There's another thing we've done over here that I thought you might enjoy. This is not finished.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to change a lot, but there's going to be a railing around it so people don't break their necks falling in. This is the place. This is called the lake outfall. It's also called the sluice. It's also called the mill race. But it was conceived as a celebration of the lake water that had been pumped from the river into the lake being pumped back into the river. One of the things that we've done in the 20th century is, it used to be like you would see a dam and they would show the overspill, and there was a real kind of aesthetic and celebration of the engineering of the thing. And I always from the beginning wanted to make a kind of celebration of returning the water to the river. So this is the sluice, and there will be water coming out of this pipe. It falls into this thing. It looks very deep. It's got some mud water. It's only about 2 feet deeper than right where the water will start to run. But basically, the water will run down this thing and run into the river. And the kind of deflection of the trough is symbolically meant to reflect the releasing of water back into the river. The ribs have to do with wanting to encourage children to play in this. And because of the mud, you can see that we've had our first tiny little bit of flooding there. This will be gunky and dirty and slimy. And the ribs are there to give, if your foot slides, your foot will hit the side of one of these and make it, it's still not a totally safe thing to play in. Playing on the edge of rivers is not safe. But we imagine water coming out of this and kids doing things like throwing in, leaves and sticks and stuff and watching it, and hopefully not litter. But watching things float out into the river, and it'll go down this little trough. Now this one was built by CUI, this particular piece, and there will be a railing. Now the slope of this is at 5%, which means that it's a wheelchair accessible ramp, except that it doesn't end. It's something that somebody could be pushed down, but everything here, the path, the trough, it all goes into the river. And it's this process of trying to be more honest about how we use things and recycle them in a park.
In terms of a design, is there any particular reason? Is it symmetrical?
Yeah,
asymmetrical?
There is a sidewalk here that goes over to the round lake, so it makes more sense eventually. And then the river walk, which we're going to walk on now, swings up here and goes right between here and the structure and connects up over there. You can see the flags, so that it meanders through.
Will there be water markings here as to how high it is, the water level painted on the side?
No, because it will be pretty much constant except when there's flooding. And as this area quickly gets underwater in a flood, like water goes over this whole thing. We'll just go over there and we'll do a little bit of about 20 more minutes and then stop. So I'm going to stop talking and mostly show you stuff because there's a lot of exciting stuff yet to see. We don't want to stop down here too long because the mosquitoes really like this particular part of the park. This was all laid out in the field by me. This was not done specifically by drawings. This was here with Mark, with stakes, and I basically worked very much with the grove of trees. And I also was really working with things like pointing the path at the picnic structure and noticing the Saarinen Tower and really trying to think of this as a three-dimensional construction, something that really reveals the landscape of Columbus and the park. So why don't we go all the way down to, we'll take about a 5-8 minute walk here, and then we'll see some more.
We're walking on the People Trail on the south end of the park.
They're using a automated native. This will all be left wild. It will be rough mowed maybe once or twice a year. But this is just incredibly beautiful in the spring. It's so full of wildflowers in here. And even in the early summer. I think again there's a yellow thing that comes out. Even I say that kind of thing once in a while. What is that yellow thing that comes out in the... Oh, no, it's a little daisy. It's a composite daisy-like flower, blooms in early August. Smaller than black-eyed Susan. So like all dumb things like that. Yeah. This is all graded back and the rough plants come up to the edge. I think it's going to be really beautiful.
Totally awesome, Michael, as my kids would say.
Now this is Millie.
Way cool is what kids say today.
Oh,
Millie
way
Reed's
cool.
gift.
This is
Millie's
this
gift.
is Millie Reed's gifts, the arbor and a fishing platform. This thing,
Look at that.
you walk through this thing, this is aligned up the driftwood. And then there's a fishing pier right
So
there.
pretty,
So you walk
beautiful.
through this thing and you get this just exquisite view of the river. And this is, you have to come inside of this thing. I'm more excited about the architecture. It's illuminated from the ground on these major ribs, and this will all be painted. The red is the color, but it will be painted this sort of orangey red. And then this just frames that view. I mean, just such a terrific view. Great t-shirt to get the photograph as a visitor center t-shirt. And then there's a fishing pier up there, another bathroom there, and then the big picnic structure over here. You can see just behind the crane.
Picnic
where it
structure
looks like
to
everything
the
got shifted
north
by floodwater.
of the arbor.
There won't be any plantings on it. Just this is a kind of abstraction of foliage.
How close can you park for this picnic?
There is road edge parking just beyond the picnic shelter along the edge of the road, like 10 or 15 spaces designated on the side of the road. Let's go look at it because this one's very far away.
The arbor
It just
has
goes
no
left, goes
foliage.
out, and then it just stops.
No vines on the arbor as a celebration of the structure.
Gift to this part of the park because this is one of her, this is all on the inside, and then there's additional, I mean, you could sit on the little wall. This will be grass in here. So, isn't it cool?
Yeah. You can have bug zappers hanging up here?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they don't like fireplace smoke too much.
Is this area sprayed at all?
I don't think it's sprayed at all.
Is Columbus sprayed for mosquitoes?
I don't
No.
think so.
They believe in mosquitoes more than spray.
They do. They got mosquitoes. Still haven't gotten the purple martin houses in the park, but there's been talk about it.
Yeah, well, it works.
It does work while they're here.
You betcha.
Okay, well, I want to just show you one other thing, and then we've got to go, but you have to see one of the historic metal bridges that's restored and painted on the People Trail. So we'll just traipse up there, and then this will also have parking by it. We wanted right down in the kind of heart of the park here to encourage more activity. And then when you leave through here, cutting off into the woods, there's a boardwalk that allows you to go off into the wetland area there, and there's a place for walking on the board all the way over to the boathouse, and you come over by the covered lake. Now just run up and look at the covered bridge. I mean the silver bridge. Tiny one about this
Walking
big.
through the grove of Osage oranges
Yeah, an edge.
to the People Trail
It would make
link
sense.
with Noblet Park.
Primitive, so ancient looking. That's what I like about them.
Osage orange is primitive.
What are they?
Osage orange. It's particularly where I went to graduate school. There's a lot of hedgerows. They planted them during the war as a hedgerow tree. Described in agricultural bulletins as hogtight.
Hogtight. Oh, I like that.
This is the North Lake. We'll go up. There's another structure by Stanley in the Overlook Hill dedicated to Billy Hodson's memory that we'll just take a peek at. Anyway, this is one of the little steel metal truss bridges that the city program brought into the park. And we restored this one and made it part of the People Trail. Then there's another one that will be a kind of sculptural object in the meadow over here. So there'll be two of them. And there was a big back and forth about what color to paint them. I grew up in a little town in upstate New York that had one of these right in the middle of the town. We were thinking of all the low maintenance DPW, Department of Transportation greens and stuff. And then I remembered when I was a kid in the 50s, they were always silver. They're probably some dreadfully toxic silver paint. But we struggled and we found this silver paint, and it just, to me, it just shimmers in here. It is perfect. It really is. It's nice that something is perfect and finished in the park. Ivy. Hill here out of a lot of the rubble from the park. We've taken all the junk out of the edge of the lake and we're piling it up. And this is going to be a hill with a sitting area on the top of it that's in the memory of Billy Hodson, who is somebody who worked at CUI and devoted a lot of energy to get this collaboration with the local contractors. I guess the thing I didn't adequately explain is that each of the local contractors that's building one of the structures is doing the project at cost. All of the profit is not being charged to the Parks Department. So it's just cost of labor, cost of materials, and no profit. And he was he went around, he was a formidable physical presence. And he kind of went around and got everybody in town, you know, I mean, he didn't intimidate them, but it was like, look, if I'm doing this, you can do this. And it was really an important person in the whole thing getting off. Anyway, the last of the Ciderwood structures, then we'll just walk all the way back. Well, you see that rusty bridge in the distance? That will be silver too. And just beyond that is where the Golden Rain Tree Room will be. This will be meadow grasses up here, not cut grass, but wildflowers. This whole thing will be a wildflower meadow up here. For sitting and leaning back, getting a tan, looking out to the lake. Then there's a platform that goes out to that column, and that's another place for fishing, because this is a place, in fact, there's some kids over there, I think they're fishing. They're fishing for something, even if it's not fish. But that projects out and you can fish off of there. And all this debris will be cleared up out of here. In fact, a lot of it has been taken out by CUI. All this was restored, and this area along the edge of the lake is the reclamation of a river edge planting with native species of redbud and river birch, native plantings that will all be in there. And then the Overlook Hill will be there, and a path here will lead you back to the playground, which is where we'll go next.
Now this is the North Lake.
This is what I call the North Lake. Separates the Round Lake from the North Lake.
The bridge is a dam which separates the North Lake from the Round Lake.
It goes up and down.
Michael, what does this project compare to nationally? Are there any parks that you're familiar with and across the country that community parks that would be on this scale?
I think this park is an unusual park in that it so much belongs to the community and the spirit of the community. But I think that we're seeing lots of towns taking land that 10 years ago people would have described as junk. I mean, we have toxic conditions here, we have floodplains, the kind of place that people wouldn't have invested in the past. That's what the open space of the future, that's where it's going to happen, in garbage dumps, gravel pits, and floodplains along rivers. And it's really, in that way, I'm not saying that the solution we've come up with is a model for the future, but the idea of making this into an important park in the town with all of the limits that it has, you know, that's I think the future. Now this is where the new road comes out, by the way. Right here you can see the light, they've got the light bases in. Anybody need a hand? Oh. We don't want to lose any.
I don't know.
It's sturdier maybe than it looks. Thank you.
Is anybody in the ditch?
Place for this is really needing identity. These are interesting, by the way. You go up to them, the surface is all got spilled concrete on it. Those were used to hold forms for precasting on the site. This used to be a concrete factory. They used to make concrete right here, and that's how the lake came to pass. They excavated gravel there, and that's some remnant of concrete forming. We're going to leave those there as kind of entry piers. Just sort of we're not going to tinker with them at all. We're just going to leave them alone. That sounds like we have to go back. We're going to put a volleyball net over here so there will be decking on it, and they will be able to sit on it and use it as a kind of platform for watching volleyball from. The road goes through here and into the covered bridge, and then goes on those blue stakes up there into the other parking lot, and that's that's the picnic shelter by the long tree road.
The cars can go over the
Bridge through.
And they know the Festival of Lights, this will be the site for most of the light displays for the Festival of Lights, and we'll be involved in taking groups around at Christmas for the Festival of Lights.
Along the new road.
We mean they'll move them, Jody, from where they are? Or?
Well, they're stored now, but they will be here in the park.
Did you say your bridge is going to be in real life?
It's just a bridge sitting here. It'll have decking in time and volleyball courts over here, so you can watch the volleyball games from up there. And then the Golden Rain Tree Room is down in here, on this side, right in this side here.
So people won't be able to walk through this bridge just to see.
Just to see it, right? Yeah. It'll be painted silver like the other ones. I think it'll look great. Yeah. Tower. You have the other tower there. It's really a great spot. That's the whole new playground there. All that. That's where the new playground is. That edge holding the ball. And there's a new horse shoes pits right over here. Not till next year.